What a countdown. Hello, everyone, again. We are live again in our main stage for a special panel.
Yes, and today's panel, at the end, we thought this first day we'll ended up with, an honest chat about the startup hustle in AEC. And we'll bring up the panelists now, one by one, in absolutely completely random order. So first to go off is Ian. Ta-dam, Ian, you're live with that fabulous mustache. So,
just for you, Dimitrie. Just for you. Just for this conversation.
Yes. Ian is the CEO of Hypar, who you've seen Anthony talking about Hypar quite. He gave a very good presentation earlier today. And now Ian is here to get grilled by none other than, sorry, I'm trying to do this in a dramatic way, but it's not really well staged, by Ralph Gootee, who's the ex-CTO of PlanGrid, currently a visiting partner at Combinator. Hello, Ralph. Welcome. This is the moment you all have to imagine the audience cheering, the audience you can't see, hear, or feel, but it's a bit of an exercise. And then we've got Andrew from Join. Hey, Andrew.
Hi.
And Andrew, thank you for joining us. And Andrew's been through a lot. He's been through at Flux and went through the journey there, and then decided he's not had enough and decided to start Build as well. And last but not least, we've got Maksim from Kreo.
Hey guys.
Hey Maksim. Who's also got like an amazing journey, like in building software for the AEC industry, spanning for the past 4 years. So here we are. I think we can all, I've given a little bit of a brief intro about you all, but I think you all deserve the intros to introduce yourselves fully. So I will nominate someone and the next person chooses the one to go next. Okay, sounds fair? Okay, cool. Let's start with Ralph.
Hi, my name is Ralph. I was CTO and co-founder of PlanGrid, which sold to Autodesk. At Autodesk, I was chief software architect for about a year, where I led integration of PlanGrid, building connected, and a bunch of other systems into Autodesk's main cloud. And then after that, I was a visiting partner at Y Combinator for a bit, and now I'm starting another company. That's me.
You need to nominate someone.
Oh, I need to pass it to somebody. I'm gonna go with Ian.
Hi. Well, Ralph, nice to meet you. I've met several on the call, but several of you are new to me, so nice to meet you all. I'm Ian Keough. I'm the Hypar, the CEO of Hypar, which is a small software company, notionally based here in Culver City, California, but we have a distributed team all over the United States and in Canada now that started in about 2018 after I, too, left Autodesk after having been there for a number of years working on projects that you might all know and love, hopefully, like Dynamo. And so, been at this for a few years now. Excited to have the conversation today. Andrew.
Great. Thanks, Ian. I'm Andrew. I never worked for Autodesk, but I have integrated with many of their APIs over time. So my background's in software engineering. I grew up in the 3D printing world. Spent some time at a very interesting company called Flux that was how I got introduced to Ian and Dimitrie back in the day. I was on the software engineering team chasing after Nick and Jen's vision there. Started Join about 4 years ago. We're the decision-making platform for the built environment, sold to general contractors who are managing collaborative delivery method projects around the country. And excited to be here. I'll pass it to Maksim.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Max. I'm like Andrew, never worked with Autodesk. So I graduated from the university with ME in nuclear power plants construction. So actually, I came from industry. I was working as a structural engineer. At some point, started to automate my daily job routine, which carried me away a lot. It has been a cool journey from structural engineer to CAD manager, BIM consultant, kind of and finally product manager and CTO and co-founder at Kreo Software Limited. I really adore building design automation related riddles and focused on providing the best software products to AEC industry. That's pretty much it. Thanks for having me here. Happy to talk to you.
It's our pleasure. Thank you all for joining and for being here. I think Matteo and me, we've introduced ourselves maybe several times throughout this conference already, so we can skip. We're here from Speckle, and we're here to just schmooze the oil. We started Speckle as a company in 2020. We started Speckle as an open source project 2015. And the rest is history, as they say. Now, it's nominally over to Ralph, who's the chair of this panel. Though, Ralph, you're actually such an interesting person that I think we should reserve some time for all of us to ask you questions as well, if you agree, of course.
Whatever you'd like, whatever you'd like. I've never been the chair of a panel. I assumed it was something like moderating. But it looks like you're moderating too. So this is going to be great.
Yes,
it's less work for me. I like that.
I'm the backup moderator, Ralph. Like, don't,
Wonderful.
We're not paying you for this, but,
I was thinking of, I had a few questions that I was really curious. I mean, everybody's a super expert in technology and AEC, and it's rare for me to be able to ask questions I'm actually interested in to a group of people like this. So that sounded fun to me. And I was figuring once we chatted a bit, I think the audience is live, this comment stream on the side, maybe we could get some questions from them too.
Yeah.
Great. What would you like, Dimitrie? Should I just kick off with like my favorite question?
Kick off with your favorite question, Ralph.
All right, I want to do it. I want to do the philosophical question of what is BIM? And this is an interesting question to me because the first time I looked at this, I discovered it was an XML format. And then over the years, I discovered it was actually a compliance format in the UK with different levels. And then eventually I learned it was indeed an Autodesk branding tactic. And so as I've gone through like the different levels of what is BIM, I'm really curious what like some super experts are. Yeah, 8 levels of BIM. We got to get to level 8. I want to know what you all think BIM is. Like, how meaningful is this? Is this really just information and 3D stuff? Or is this something more? I want to hear your raw thoughts on this. Let's keep it to like 2 to 3 minutes because we could talk forever. I'm going to flip it up. We're going to start with Maksim. Maksim, what's BIM to you?
It's a very good question. And I don't want to overcomplicate, to be honest with you. For me, BIM is just a concept, right? So it's a concept about how we call a bunch of data in our industry. So basically we say, okay, here are our 3D representation, here are our properties, here are our information from different levels, from different stages, from different industries, and this is what we call BIM. But actually, for me, it's just a data, right? So I don't see any difference in between, let's say, column family in Revit and OBJ format plus Excel properties or JSON file or whatever. For me, it's the same, right? So you can call this BIM format and you can call this BIM format. So very simple. So it's just a data and it's a concept how we wrap the data in our industry. That's it. I don't need 2 minutes. It's really easy.
That's perfect. Max, I love the simplicity. Who wants to give a complex answer? Who's got a like a different perspective? I like Maximum.
I've got a different one. Go ahead.
I love that.
Oh, I don't know. Do I want to let you go first, Andrew?
Yeah, BIM was a bad idea. How about that? BIM was a bad idea.
He gets to say it.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to do the same thing? That's good. I guess you've gone way deeper on like the IFC schemas than I have. Yeah, look, like there's a lot of data about the built environment, and in other industries, that data gets organized into databases that allow you to answer, important questions about that data set and model important things about whatever that domain is. In AEC, we built BIM technology as, around 3D modeling, and then hung all of this other data off of effectively the modeling process inside of one major tool, Revit. And Revit doesn't generate data very easily. It's built to generate huge stacks of drawings. They get updated much more easily than they would have been, without Revit. Like it improves the creation of drawings, and there are wonderful tools that have been developed to make sure that the most recent version of those drawings make it to the right person on site. But BIM's got information subjugated to the modeling piece, and I think that's a real shame in terms of its origin. I think a lot of people are beginning to address some of the opportunities that exist around that data, and they're still calling it BIM. And so, maybe even though BIM was a bad idea, now it's becoming a good thing because it's being treated more like a database. But yeah, I would say it was a bad idea.
I'm glad that you put it out there and said it, but I'll provide an anecdote. When I got out of graduate school, I went to work for Bureau Happold Consulting Engineers in New York City, and they had very recently finished Foster's British Museum roof. And for those of you who have a picture of this, it's a very complex kind of glass structure that surrounds the courtyard of the British Museum, covers the courtyard of the British Museum. And they explained the whole process to me by which this building got built. And it was, we had Excel for calculating where the node positions were. We had special software we had written to do the analysis, the relapse analysis of the shape, which connected to numerically controlled cutting equipment, which cut the steel nodes, which connected to on-site software where they were doing laser positioning, all this stuff. Incredibly rich information-backed process for creating complex architecture. Very shortly thereafter, Revit Structure 1 showed up in a cellophane-wrapped box on my desk, and we began our Revit journey, and I learned about this thing that was called BIM. And I was like, well, wait, we already had these information-rich processes where, like Andrew was saying, we were putting data, structuring data in databases according to work processes that we needed to be doing, whether that was design, analysis, whatever. And then along came this thing that kind of like put a name to this thing, but then became something else. And it became more of a way to make you feel like you were missing out, like you weren't part of the cool crowd, like you weren't doing enough if you weren't doing BIM, when in fact, many of the processes that existed for literally decades before, BIM became a thing that we talked about were more BIM than what Revit is today, true to what Andrew is saying, which is like an incredibly powerful coordinated drawing generation tool.
Love it, y'all. Dimitrie and Matteo, what about you all?
I do actually have a quick comment. I think, as we are speaking, the BIM to me is a bit like CAD plus Excel. But the fact that nowadays so many practices need still to use Excel, that means that BIM is a bit of a failure, because if it's a database in itself, why do we need to use external databases or data stores if BIM was supposed to be that?
Yeah, and I have difficulty in coming to terms with BIM, mostly because what Ian was saying later was that like it's become a bit of a priesthood, or there is a priesthood attached to it, which is good, like with any technology, but sometimes it's detrimental to progress per se. Like it's just CAD plus Excel, guys. It's a database, like. Well,
and I don't want to take this conversation in a totally different direction, Ralph, but in terms of the priesthood and these terms that we all, we kind of want to be part of, digital twin is going the same way, right? Everybody's saying, I need a digital twin. What is a digital twin? I don't know what a digital twin is. It's a lot of data. If you looked at the Autodesk keynotes the other day, the number, it was a drinking game for every time somebody said data. We would have all been on the floor, and it's had about a couple of minutes, This idea that like if you just have the data, somehow good processes will magically emerge from data is kind of a funny thing, but that's where the digital twin conversation is going.
Ian, I'd say you're a little late on the kind of train there. About 2 years ago when I was at Autodesk, I remember like one job I was given was like, go figure out what digital twin means. Like literally that was my job. Like, I don't know what that means. Like, go figure it out. And so I went and I would travel the world. They'd send me to like Copenhagen. And then like I'd be talking with the executives in Copenhagen, and the executive in Copenhagen, owner of the construction company, would look at me very seriously and be like, what's the digital twin? And like, so I kind of got a circular reference, Autodesk sent me out to figure it out. And then I went out to the customers and they asked me the same thing. So I enjoyed that.
I'm imagining this traveling montage with you, like, eating soup in somebody's hovel and asking them, like, what is the digital twin?
What is the digital twin? What is this? Yeah. It seems that like I think what you're getting at is that branding is really a kind of influence here in how we kind of work as an industry. I think like maybe I don't know. Let's just harp on this for a bit. My gut on why branding was so powerful for BIM and digital twin was that the industry in general is thought of as kind of technologically behind, and they feel that these words are powerful and kind of like I don't know, updating it to the next technology. But it's unfortunately kind of there's nothing below it, which is what you're noticing. Anyone else have any depths on digital twin beyond the obviousness of it being a 3D model that matches reality and that obvious fact? Anyone have any other depths of digital twin or any digital twin stories they want to share?
Not really. It's just you've got
Nobody.
a really nice comment from the audience. Ralph is like research.
I mean, I think one of the things is that there's this idea of digital transformation, and that our industry has had to undergo the digital transformation for decades. And if I were looking at that from the outside and saying, how would I motivate people to buy my software? I would make them feel like they weren't inadequate.
Yeah.
Like you're missing out. You haven't completed your digital transformation. You haven't achieved the next level of Zen unless you've built a digital twin or you're doing BIM or 5D or whatever it is.
That's right. As anyone, as you approach this, the problems seem real to me, what they're getting at with BIM and digital twins. They want like a corpus of data that's synchronized and available across different platforms. And I'm totally not trying to make this a Speckle sales call. So I'll try to not talk about the fact that Speckle seems to be that. But as I was dealing with this in other companies, the only obvious choice I saw for a lot of companies was in America, in the United States at least, was Forge. Let's just dump all our data in Forge and then hope it's fast enough and works at scale. Anyone else, what other solutions are you seeing out there besides for the obvious great open source solutions like Speckle, the only open source solution for this, and something like the behemoth of Autodesk's Forge? Anyone see anything else interesting or unique here? Building it themselves? I just see a lot of companies building it themselves right now.
So I think internal solutions to these problems exist, and they're always, I think you can get everybody on this call ranting about them. There's a lot of AEC companies building, literally, just like with the BIM question, it's like a hit below the belt. There's a lot of companies that build their own internal solutions, mostly because they want to actually feel in control of what they're doing and customize those processes, and they don't really have an outlet to do so. Forge doesn't offer them that. And this is the net result. But beyond that...
Sorry, finish that, Dimitrie.
No, I finished.
Well, what I was going to say is Hypar approaches this in a pretty fundamentally different way. I look at this whole sort of data for data's sake conversation, and I think we're missing a massive opportunity, which is and data standardization. Andrew said that I had done the deep dive into IFC over the years and everything else. We're missing the ability to standardize on process, on logic, on the actual things that we do as design professionals and engineering professionals that we would want to turn into replicatable, automated kind of things and give ourselves superpowers. We're still stuck in this many decades long conversation about what shape a beam should take in IFC so that 50 years from now I can open up my IFC file in Revit. We're stuck in the mud and we're spinning around this. And so Hypar kind of approached this in a completely different way. We said the data is important. Obviously, the way that data is communicated between systems has to adhere to certain schemas, and we have to agree on those contractual data payloads between services. But the services themselves that actually do the thing, the logic, the brains, the expertise that we have as an industry is something that we need to start talking about, creating, encoding, sharing, running at scale, that kind of stuff. I love Speckle from the data side, but there's a Speckle plus Hypar version of this thing, which is both the data flow plus the process logic that I think we need to achieve.
I think the missing piece is actually the other direction. Speckle's got a series of connectors, but there's no cloud hosted or self-hosted data store actually. And I think a lot of folks in this industry, I'm looking at the comments and seeing a bunch of early Flux users as well, have come to the question of how can we improve the design process from the perspective of a designer who goes through design tasks, and they've said, oh, can we encode, the series of judgments that are made in designing something into a piece of logic and run it over and over and over. And it's great. There's a lot of value in that. There's a lot of value in just getting the right data from one tool to another if that process is still going to happen in an automated way. But if you look at other industries, there's usually a SQL database somewhere that you can run queries against and answer
Andrew,
questions.
I'm just gonna have to interrupt you because we store all the data that we shuffle between people in a
great.
SQL database. That's a small parenthesis, but
yeah, I don't want to downplay the importance of having that data stored, which is just static data on which you can ask questions of. That is also, though, a natural byproduct of the kind of stuff, for instance, that Hypar is doing. Like Hypar generates a structural model. You've got a structural model now that you can ask questions of without actually re-executing the logic to regenerate a new structural model. That's why I say that. I mean, there's like an important part. There is both the static story and the sort of dynamic generative story, which I think are both important.
Let's focus in on that. That was one of my other favorite questions I had on my list, which was I want to talk about generative design and procedural creation of buildings. I remember first seeing Flux in 2011 or 2012, very early and very stealth. Was that right, Andrew? Is it the right company? I hope I'm not thinking of a different company.
Yeah,
generative buildings.
Flux went through many iterations. That was before I was there, but yeah.
Early. And I was blown away because I was building like a PDF viewer, blueprint viewer on iPad, and like here's Flux trying to like solve some fundamental challenges of architecture and construction. And if you really play the technology forward like 1,000, 2,000 years, and you put on your theoretical hat, it's pretty clear that we should be able to build most buildings procedurally, given enough time, big enough model, enough descriptions written down, gigabytes of data or whatever, gigabytes of rule sets. But I haven't seen anything really approach it, from dirt all the way to the end. I've seen, I think I've seen some office layouts. I've seen some HVAC systems. I've seen some dirt work, where they try to get the whole dirt work foundational stage in a procedural way for a square, not for like a complicated building. How far are we away from this? Is this a holy grail? Do we even want to do this anymore as an industry? Or is this something that's still around the corner? I'd love to hear Andrew's opinion first.
Yeah, I think it depends on the project type. I think if you look at some of the things that companies like Hyarc are doing in the single family residential space, we're actually potentially much closer than we might think. I think most folks on this call spend more time in sort of commercial, industrial, multifamily healthcare spaces. Those projects are they're just so complicated. They're so unique. There's so many more Hypar functions that would have to be stacked on top of each other or built unique to some bizarre constraint on the project to fully procedurally generate it. So I think we're pretty close on some pretty exciting projects, and I think we'll get there over time elsewhere.
That's wonderful to hear. How about you, Maksim?
Yeah, I can tell you it's progressing a lot, and it didn't stop after Flux. Flux, it was just the beginning. I mean, the market of different configurators is growing and growing quite quickly. You didn't see so far no one who actually covered all possible contexts, right? But because obviously when you want to design a building, you should consider a lot of different contexts. For example, market context can tell you what kind of apartments you want to see in this building. Site context can tell you about flooding zones, about sunlight, daylight, etc., right? Then planning context can tell you, okay, this is rules about facades. This is St. Paul Cathedral. You cannot build higher. You cannot build here. You cannot, because here you have a church and here you have different place. So just like do whatever you want, but don't cross this line. So this is about planning context. There is another context, which is a building context, about building is being buildable. What topology do you have? How corridors connected to units? What kind of lift hall configurations do you have? What kind of GEA to NEA ratio you want to achieve, etc., etc. But it's not all. There are a lot of other different contexts. Let's say construction context or logistic context. Let's say when you build a building in a specific cities of Canada, you should respect the logistic because some elements simply cannot be delivered to this particular site. It's very important, and there is even manufacturing context when we're talking about prefab stuff and MMC. And the problem is like all these different contexts they are important for certain player at certain period of time. Let's say architect cares about part of this context at a certain period of time. Then let's say contractor cares about different contexts a little bit later in the project flow. And this is a point that the idea you are talking about, let's say, if we're talking about procedurally generated, buildable, and building, it can be achieved only in a company which has everything under one umbrella. I mean,
vertically integrated.
Yeah, fully vertically integrated company.
Yep.
I mean, of course, in the future, maybe we'll be able to achieve it on a different services in some specific smart flow. But right now, I think it's like, you see, like any problem, like when we want to solve any problem, there are basically two ways. First way, it's automation, and second way, it's a process change. And in a vertically integrated company, you have these benefits from a process because you can actually manage all these guys under one umbrella. And at the same time, this fix will help you to have a little bit cheaper automation. So you don't need to spend a lot of kind of time and money on automation and this kind of hack of industry now.
How vertical are you referring to? Are you referring all the way to the ownership of the building too? I've seen vertical companies all the way down to the development, and I've seen it end at the GC. What do you think?
I mean, for the past year, I probably talked to 90 or 100 different vertically integrated companies because it was our primary focus. And it's not necessary that it should be like a owner plus vertically integrated company, but at least it should be designers, architects, engineers, contractors, and manufacturers. That's enough to kind of to automate enough, right?
That's enough.
Just this,
It's I think what's cool about that is what you're getting at is that it's all about the alignment of data ownership across the entire company. If you do get the owner level though, then you start getting into the knowledge around where is actually profitable to build. Like where do I really want to put the building, and then how much did it cost me to build the building? And then 5 years later, how much did it cost me to maintain the building? It's cool to hear that we're getting closer in some vertical areas. I think Hypar was mentioned. I think they're thrown in there as well. So we've at least got, like, for these very specific solutions like residential, we're getting pretty close. That's really good.
And I can,
please.
Well, I was going to hook onto something Andrew Human from our team, from the Hypar team, commented here. You know, it's not an all or nothing proposition. The problem is that there's a couple problems. One, we've been mapping how generative design will work onto the industry as we see it now. Maxim talked about you have an architect, and the architect does this, and at some point they hand it over to the contractor, and the contractor does this, and thereby vertical integration has happened because we saw that whole thing was broken.
Yes.
We expect that the trends in the industry that are happening now, which will make Hypar successful, will actually reshape what all these roles are. The owner and the contractor are coming now together to agree on a building, and contractors are coming to Hypar and saying, can you just generate us a building? Because these are the systems we know how to build. It doesn't have to be architecture with a capital A, but it has to have this capacity, everything defined by it. And the architect is getting squeezed in the middle. There will be fundamental shifts in the actual roles and responsibilities of the traditional parties in the design to construction pipeline as a result of technology like Hypar.
Yeah,
that's one point. The second point, though, is that to Andrew's point in the chat there, it's not all or nothing. It will creep up on us. More and more of this stuff will just be, everybody's imagining that we have to go to vertical integration. We don't have to go to vertical. We can put systems out there right now that generate your mechanical systems, that automate the layout of all of your drywall in your building, that generate your parking structure, that generate your multifamily residential. It's just going to happen, and one day we're going to turn around, and the larger part of our built environment is going to be procedurally generated, as you suggest, Ralph. But it will happen.
And here, sorry, it's just one very important point. I agree totally with Ian about that. It's not only about vertically integrated companies, but the point is like vertical integration is the complexity of algorithms which will necessary to kind of to get this built in. generated automatically, just because they can kind of reduce the number of options, constraints, and other considerations. And I agree with you that actually the best building concepts we've met on our end, they actually came from contractors, which works in accordance with design, build, procurement road.
Yeah.
Because they start very early, they get conceptual model, and they play their game. And this is the best place because they have skin in the game. They know what they want to build. They know they put millions of dollars in a formwork system, and they don't care. They will use this formwork system, right? And they don't care about architecture and stuff like that. They want to use it. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I mean, what works? The two topics we're talking about are so related as we discuss them, because like if it really is true that we need different, for lack of a better term, point solutions to solve each of the challenges of procedural generation, data interchange is crucial. And data interchange is one of the challenges we talked about before. So maybe these vertical companies that you referred to, they already have data interchange systems they might have built. Maybe they have a Redshift system themselves or some other type of sophisticated IT running in the background that they can use to integrate and share data. Really fascinating topic around integration. I see people are talking about Katera as well a lot in the chat. And I just want to mention, I don't know much about Katera. I've ran into them a few times. One thing I do know is that it was hard to sell into Katera because Katera wanted to do everything. Katera didn't want to use PlanGrid's blueprint viewer. They were going to make their own. Katera didn't want to use blah, blah, blah's issue tracker. They were going to make their own. Like anytime Katera was presented with a challenge, I knew their solution was, no, we're going to solve that internally. So obviously we're getting some of the challenges, at least I saw in a company that tried to be vertically integrated, is like, you just don't have the time and the energy to solve the world's problems. Any other comments about Katera?
Well, this is somewhat on Katera, but also like further up, somebody had mentioned, hey, can you talk a little bit about WeWork and everything else? I happen to have the benefit of having several team members who came out of WeWork and having heard a lot of the stories there, and also having heard all the stories that everybody has heard about. The problem with both Katera and WeWork was that they both started to think of themselves as technology companies. They started to, and there's a lot of reasons that happens. It happens often because your investors want you, they want to sell you as a technology company. You want to think of yourself as a technology company. You want to attract technology talent. There's a lot of reasons it happens. And when that happens, you immediately shut the door, right? They were like, we've got Apollo, Okay, show me Apollo. Give me a demo. No, it's vaporware, like you will never see the system actually running or doing anything. And I never quite understood that, but that is where strong leadership in the company has to say our value proposition to the industry is not software. It's the vertical integration piece. It's us figuring out how to actually design and construct these buildings for a low cost for our customer, safely, effectively. It's not building our own project management software or whatever. It's a trap that a lot of people fall into.
Oh my gosh, dude. The contractors building their own project management solution is like, I think they kind of stopped, right? Everyone that I know that tried it, like Turner, everyone else, CDocs, all that crap. Like everyone that I know stopped doing that eventually and just bought Procore or maybe Autodesk. And what do you think, Andrew? I see you nodding.
Yeah. There's we still occasionally bump into folks who are doing their own thing, but contractors in particular seem to have figured out that they can deliver huge amounts of value and be increasingly profitable as a company without writing their own software. Yeah. Thanks for helping teach them that lesson. Yeah.
We tried our best. Adobe Acrobat only works so well. And after a few teams tried to build a blueprint viewer, they figured out it was kind of a pain in the butt. Anyone else see anything around like contractors? The only interesting thing I've seen contractors do is getting back to that vertical integration when they have some ownership of the building and they have some development. Maybe they want to, this is kind of a newer strategy I've seen around the housing market changes, but they might use that data about like building in a certain area, a certain region, the same type of building to build their next building. And that type of data is not like a little bit, some Excel sheets. I mean, a full data corpus of like economic, construction, permits, legal, just everything. I've seen a few big contractors try that. Anyone else seen something interesting from the in-house contracting teams or developers or architects?
We've definitely seen in the last few years, we've talked with a lot of, especially self-perform contractors here in the United States, and I'm guessing this is a pattern around the world, starting to figure out how to best leverage all their historical data. right? They're hiring chief data officers.
I think it's trend right now. Yeah, it's really trend right now. I saw a lot of companies who try to do that, but I never seen one succeed, to be honest.
Well, and the challenge, I think, Maksim, and we kind of see the same thing. We see a lot of people trying to figure it out, but it's like all of the firms who say, we have hundreds of Revit models that we've built over. We should use these to do machine learning. And they realize, like, we named all the doors differently in all the models, and it'll take us years and years and years to clean all this shit up so we can get it to a place where we can use it for that. So I think we have a problem where the processes don't yet lend themselves to creating data that allows you to take advantage in that way.
And also there is a problem that they usually want to rely on the metrics, which actually change constantly during the time. Let's say when it's a cost per megawatt or whatever, right? So you simply cannot compare your historical project like 5 years ago by cost of megawatt with a project today. So it's just impossible. And this is the first problem, and it's usual data analysis, right? So first of all, you need to define your data set, you need to go through it, you need to define some patterns, then you need to define some stable metrics, and it's quite fun exercise.
Yeah, Ralph, you were asking about interesting things coming out of the contractors. One thing we're seeing a lot of is what you might call like value integration instead of full vertical integration. If like 10 years ago, GCs, especially in the United States, were full like paper builders. Like they didn't build anything. They just shuffled risk amongst a bunch of parties. Katera was the opposite end of the spectrum, where they did everything and built all of their systems and managed all of their data. But it's not that the pendulum has swung all the way there, but a lot more folks are looking strategically, we see, at bringing some trades in-house, developing offsite production capabilities themselves. It's not we're going to do everything, but it's like, hey, if we own concrete and drywall, for example, I mean, these determine schedule. We can make a lot of money in these ones. This is a good one to own. Let's keep working with third parties for these other trades because the economics are somewhat different. Yeah.
And your point there, Andrew, about shuffling risk around, which is the thing that doesn't come up in a lot of these conversations around data and generative design and everything else, but it absolutely should, is that the reason a lot of those contractors have started to push prefabrication and modularization is because it also helps them to reduce their risk, right? Like it helps them to control their work processes, reduce the risk, and then they become experts in those systems. And that's why we've seen this kind of trend towards like owners going around the architect directly to the contractor and saying, hey, look, I know you did that building and it was basically all prefabricated. Can you like generate me a version of that thing that's all prefabricated and tell me if I can fit my program in there? And then I'll go back to the architect and I'll work with them to actually do the proper design process.
Yeah, to reinforce that point, I can even tell you that actually manufacturers, they started to hire architects to create a building concepts so they can showcase their modular systems, or they can showcase their CLT, LVL stuff. Just imagine, I know one company like that. So they hired a big architectural firm. They created building concepts for them, like offices, open space, maximum 7 stories, this duct system, this MEP, this. And then they just put their kit of parts and they started to search a company who will create an automated building configurator for this specific system. They even respected planning permitting. I mean, this is cool stuff. I don't know why everybody wants to kill architects and all this stuff. And
no one wants to kill architects. They
won't, yeah. And I don't know why. Contractors, especially aggressive contractors in the United States, guys, they want to kill architects. I know that.
You think so? Yeah, but we're going to have, I mean, the United States is a really ugly country as far as architecture goes in most places. So that kind of makes sense. All right, let's do some. Go ahead, Max.
No. I just wanted to say it was a joke, and I just heard it a few times from a few contractors, and this is why I said it.
No, we know what you're getting. There's a lot of tension. I mean, what you get at is serious. There's a lot of tension between, especially in the United States, between architects and contractors. And I think what Ian was getting at earlier around the changes and the flow, also I've seen that with lean construction. As soon as you start trying to get alignment between the owner, the designer, and the GC, especially with dollars. So it's like, hey, you deliver this building on time, on budget, here's the pot of money that you all get to share. That just changes everything around the alignments and getting the job done quicker and with a lot more trade-offs around value contracting.
Ralph, you weren't making the point about architect, but I'm going to draw this back to architects.
Do it.
I don't think anybody wants to kill architects. The challenge in our industry, and this is both consulting architects, consulting engineers, and many of the other consultants involved in a complex building project, they get paid for their time. They don't get paid for their product.
Yes, that's right.
And this is fundamentally in competition with software, for instance, that wants to make you superpower you and make you faster, stronger, better at what you do. So the trends that we see, we have this friction because we're developing generative algorithms to generate building systems, and people are saying, well, you know, that's my job. You could never do this as effectively as I could, whatever. And in the future, we will. And you will have to you will have to adapt. The business models in the industry will have to adapt to either take advantage of that and do 20 buildings next year as opposed to the 10 they did in the year previous, or somebody else who has adapted will eat your lunch.
Ian, important question for you here. Do you have architects on your payroll?
Yeah, my whole team is architects.
Of course. Yeah, I figured so, right?
Well, actually, wait, big asterisk. Sorry, we have one registered architect on our payroll.
Yeah, totally.
We have a bunch of people who went to architecture school.
It's very important. Thank you that you mentioned it. It's very important. Yeah. I knew that topic will work out. So, and actually, I want to continue. And I also agree that actually the industry is changing, and actually all these changes, they actually affect a lot of architects. And I don't know why, but the whole industry thinks that architects should every architect should be transformed into kind of a generative design guy. But this is not something what I believe in. I mean, there are a bunch of different ways for architects to change industry and to be changed. And it's not only about this nice generative design flow. No one should be working in accordance with this kind of religion, right? Because there are a lot of other ways. For example, architects can think up the best building concept in the world, and then IT teams will be able to automate it, or they can just work on a very unique and, you know, kind of bizarre projects, etc. I mean, there are a bunch of different ways.
I'm going to take exception, though, with your classification there, Maksim, of the IT team now can take over the generative design, the running the algorithms, the everything else. The fact that we have, and I mean, God knows, softwares that I've worked on over the last 10 years have been responsible for the development of this role of the computational designer. I think it's a huge fallacy that we give people a name, computational designer. It's just crazy to me because we've separated out people who are interested in like process and logic automation from design. They are designers, they are engineers, they just want to do things more quickly. So I don't like this idea that we like throw it over the fence to the person who's going to like help us automate stuff. That should be ingrained in all of our tools and processes and procedures that we use in our practice.
I think that's what Greg's getting at here. Greg from the comments says, in all seriousness, BIM has made contract architect relationship worse. And it's that throwing over the fence, I feel, that's happened there, where it's like, I own my side of the model, you own your side of the model, here's yours, here's mine, blah, blah, blah. So that makes a lot of sense to me that we're seeing the same thing there. Well, we got a little longer. I'd love some questions from the audience. You know, go ahead and throw it in there and we'll pick our favorite. We can have Matteo and Dimitrie pick. They have some way of highlighting your comments. So I don't know how they do that, but that seems like the right way to go.
I think you just click on the comment.
Yeah, exactly. Click on the comment you want to highlight. We've got one from Claire that's really long, and we'll need to read it through. So let's see what happens.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's read it. I'm going to put it in my Kindle.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably something we're trying to discuss earlier, like how do we save architects from themselves?
Wow, yeah, that's a good question.
We need to have a dedicated session about it, yeah.
I'm going to start off here because maybe she might be quoting me in capital A architecture there in the end. But this is a fantastic question. It's a question we address all the time. And what I will say, it's advancing up because people are talking. So wait, I got to go back to it. The generating incentive to build towards the average. the larger part of everything in the built environment is the average.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that people hold an image in their mind of architecture with a capital A, but inside those walls, behind that ceiling, underneath the ground, is incredibly average stuff. And it's usually the pitch that I use for Hypar. I go into some investor's office and I say, look, this building that we're sitting in here, if you take all this drywall off the wall, if you take this drop ceiling out, all the mechanical systems in there, the structural system, the facade system, these are all very average things that are oftentimes very procedural in how you would go about generating them. So yes, maybe there's an incentive towards moving towards the average, but a huge amount of the built environment is incredibly average.
This is how it should be. Yeah, it's pretty
and,
logical.
and regional too. Like there's all kinds of boring regional codes you have to follow that like tons of them. And every region
or lack of.
And this is the whole point of the whole building concepts automation, right? And this is what I really love to talk about future of architecture. Sorry, guys. And we can see architects who really focused on very unique and bizarre projects, which will never, let's say, swallow any automation or any scripts or any algorithms, right? And as architects can think up the best building concepts which can be automated by anyone, right? I don't know who is that, but my point was in the previous kind of topic that I don't believe that person can be simultaneously computational designer, ML guy, and architect. I just don't believe in it. Yeah. It's not, it can be kind of half-half, right? But at the same time, this guy who half architect, half an, I don't know, mathematician, he will not be able to actually, I mean, it's just half-half. So I'm personally don't believe in it. So, and another point, again, let's say generative design flow, right? It's also very appropriate methodology, especially for this kind of computational teams and also for very specific objects like facades or curtain panels, a lot of things. And so back to my point, it's like there always will be architects who will be architects like right now.
Yeah.
Who will work on
Maxim, we're going to dig you out of it. We got Daniel Davis. Matteo, can you highlight Daniel Davis's comment? No, I think this aligns exactly with what you're saying, right? Like, look, there's always going to be architects that are going to be designing, and we're going to build tools so they design better. So they don't have to worry about the widths of the bathroom in California's code. They can, worry about the beautiful bathroom. Or it not being beautiful, but well designed. Whatever you want to think of as design. All right, good questions. All right, got a question, just says Leonardo da Vinci. Any other questions from the audience that you all are interested in asking the panel?
Yeah, Timon Hazel has one that I think he's asked twice, I think is good.
I'm trying to find it. There we go.
Boom.
I have an opinion.
You have an opinion. Go for it then.
Great.
Oh, wow. What a good question.
Yeah, so I can tell you what I would change. I've never worked as an architect, but I've hired a bunch of people, very smart people who worked as architects and left industry. And I think the first thing that I would drop is the ownership structure, where it seems that to make partner, to sort of succeed, to not be able to, make it into affordable housing inside of San Francisco because your salary is too low to just sort of succeed as a professional, you have to make partner. Making partner is almost always tied to either bringing business in or heroic developments, delivering particular iconic projects for the firm. It's not tied to people who bring up by 5% every project that the firm does. And this pushes out computational designers, it pushes out technologists, it pushes out people who can have a leveraged contribution to the firm's success as a whole. So I think that's one of the most damaging things. The other thing I would drop is the customer base. Actually, I would sell the design build general contractors, and I'd sell a flat fee rather than selling by time, and I'd figure out how to enable it with technology.
On that point, I'm going to try and frame this in the way that Timon is asking the question. What would you keep from your existing design?
I would still hire architects. I would still hire smart architects. Yeah.
Well, so there's that. And I fully agree with that, by the way, again, with a team full of architects. The skill set there is incredible. But what I do see a lot of architecture firms doing, and especially because this is a trend in the industry, they are trying to move to products over projects. They're trying to say, what is the replicatable thing that I can provide, whether it's a certain type of office environment that we can roll out really quickly. We've done this on many projects before, or a furniture line, or whatever that thing is. If you were going to leave architecture and start a new AEC sort of firm today, that is where everything is going. People are starting to think in terms of products instead of projects. It's why you see so many configurators out there, because people want to start creating high quality, replicatable processes that you can sell as your expertise, and again, get away from selling your time.
But just vertically integrate the shit out of it. And the civil engineers, I just bring in as many anything I needed to own my own destiny, I would try to bring in.
Well, but Matteo made a point earlier, and I think his point is very well taken. He and Andrew were having a back and forth about integration or collaboration. The thing that the kind of tools that many of us are building enables, that is not enabled by the tools that we have right now in AEC, is the ability for us to reach out and just talk to somebody else's API. I don't actually want to have civil engineers on my staff. I want to have building civil engineering function.
I was answering for me, Ian. Just me. It was that was my answer, not a good generic answer. I would just want everyone to work for me for some reason. I don't want to deal with any vendors. I have vendor fatigue. There's a question. Do CTOs have vendor fatigue? Answer is yes. We have vendor fatigue.
I think we have about 10 minutes left. It'd be also cool to go through our personal histories as, or your personal histories as startup founders. What do you feel were the biggest struggles you had so far? And, if you want to describe them, or we also mentioned, potential exit scenarios. What do you think is the best exit scenario in our industry?
And here we're trying to motivate people from the audience to start more startups, right? That would be so, try and not be too jaded or sarcastic in your answers.
What are the obstacles, right, to get a new business going and a startup or a project?
The largest obstacle is apathy. We have an incredibly apathetic demographic in AEC who have been using the same software for decades, and they're just super grumpy about that software, and that has kind of turned into this, we're never going to bend that productivity curve that everybody shows in their PowerPoint presentation. We're never going to be able to do that because it's just too complicated. It's just too, fuck that. It's not too complicated, but you have to get started. And there are a billion problems to solve. And every one of those problems in a $12 trillion global annual spend industry is a big problem. Somebody said the other day, I think it was Anthony Thorpe, who said, I guess the greatest minds in our industry are now doing space planning. Okay, great. Why not? It's a tractable problem that a lot of people see that they can apply computation to. Architects are allowed to are allowing a little bit of that to be given away to automation. Let's start there. You got to start somewhere. So just start.
Yeah. And I agree about apathy as being kind of an important keyword here. Like it was mentioned before when we were discussing the BIM coordinator relationship with architects also becoming very apathetic because of how things are being done.
Do you guys think that this is kind of a feature of a construction industry, really?
You're calling it a feature, Maksim.
Yeah, I'm calling it a feature. Yeah, because I cannot believe that it's just a feature of our industry. I think every industry has the same apathy. I don't believe it's just about construction guys, these traditional guys, very grumpy, as you said. It's just, the problem is, and you're right, there are billions of different problems. And the construction industry, and we always compare it with automobile industry. Why the construction industry is not so well automated? But the problem is, it's just a little bit more difficult than automobile industry. It's more contextual. You can build one car and sell it across the whole Europe, but you never will be able to sell it to the same buildings, even in one city. So it's just very contextual, and it's very difficult to automate, to disrupt, and to change stuff. it's not. I think people are pretty the same, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just the people.
Yeah, I agree with Max. I think that if you're starting a company and you're finding that people are grumpy and don't want what you're trying to sell them, it's going to be a long road to having a sustainable business. For all its faults, Katera exposed a very real market need. Like, yes, they went out of business and they did it with $3 billion of backlog because there's a lot of hunger in the industry to deliver in a new way. I mean, if you look at the fundamental statistics, I mean, like, I think all of us at different times have given presentations citing these numbers, right? But it's like 3 billion people are going to move to urban centers in the next 30 years. Just like the sheer volume of buildings that need to happen is stunning. And, people like I feel a lot of urgency around getting housing in the Bay Area, for example. And so, I wonder, I think I agree with Max. I think people are people, and that if you're finding that it's a real slog to sell what you're trying to sell, then maybe sell something slightly different or sell it to a different person.
Which is the perfect segue. Sell it to a different person. Before we started Hypar, I knew nothing about building product manufacturers. That is the people who build the stuff that actually goes in the building.
Mm-hmm.
But what we found out through our journey over the last few years is that a lot of them have highly engineered systems that are engineered in a very conventional way, and which keep them from making money because it takes a long time to engineer that system, because they only make money when they sell you stuff that goes in the building. Hilti wants to paint your building red. That's a thing that they say. They want everything in your building hung with a Hilti anchor, fastened with a Hilti fastener, fire stopped with Hilti fire stopping. But doing that at scale is a huge problem for them and requires software and automation. So there's a whole space of opportunity out there that we didn't even know existed in our industry, which is massive, and which you could go into with these startups and say, I'm going to build you a product configuration for laying out your specific type of drainage system. I'm going to build you a configurator for laying out your specific type of prefabricated wood system. There's just a ton of opportunity there. No, you are not going to sell to architects, probably. Good luck. You might. Figma for space planning. God bless you. But there's a ton of other people out there to sell to in our industry.
Okay, we're approaching the time, guys. So, let's maybe parting words from each in an upbeat mood, or not upbeat if you so want it. It depends,
I'll end. It was nice chatting with you all. I really enjoyed the panel discussion. I just wanted to say, for everyone that was watching, I saw some really positive comments. Someone said this is the best conversation they've seen in 2 years. I just want you to know I read that. I hope you had a good time listening, and I really appreciate that myself. Great chatting with y'all.
Likewise, Ralph. Thank you.
Yes, Ralph. Thank you. And Maksim, Andrew, Ian, Matteo.
Yeah, I wanted to add. Sorry, go ahead, Dimitrie. Yeah,
no, go ahead, Maksim.
Yeah, I just want to say that I really love architects, and really.
Maxim is now afraid that there's going to be a vendetta going on behind.
No. I spent 4 years working in a company just to really love architects. So it was a big way from a structural engineer who actually had the problems with architects to a person who really love architects. And but anyway, the conclusion here is I also wanted to say thank you guys. It was really pleasure. Cool to hear your thoughts, and really nice.
Thank you for joining us.
Yo,
great.
Then we'll call it a day. For us, it's been a long evening. For some of you, it's early morning. For some of you, it's even later. And we'll see you all tomorrow. If you're still listening, this is my radio show duty to inform you that Connect actually keeps on going for the next 2 days. Tomorrow, we're kicking off with a panel on open source, and then we're going to have a bunch of other nice presentations and so on. So everybody's invited.
All right.
Ciao, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.